Good afternoon. My name is Hallie Leinhart. I'm the Outreach Specialist for the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Financial Coaching, A4 Framework and Application of Coaching Models. Our presenters today are Peggy Olive, Financial Capability Specialist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, an extension. Becky Smith, Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Financial Clinic in New York City, and Stefan Hench, Assistant Director of Services at the Financial Clinic as well. And just a reminder before we get started with the presentations, to submit questions to be answered in the question and answer portion that will take place in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar, please submit your question in the Q&A box located on the left side of your screen. And with that, I will turn it over to Peggy.
Thanks, Haley. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, and hopefully so can everybody else out there. I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit more about financial coaching, including a few different frameworks and then the A4 model we use here at the University of Wisconsin. And just a little foundation or background, thinking about financial well-being, which really is the ultimate goal of all of this financial education that we so frequently talk about. CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, had a great publication they just released recently about financial well-being, which in a nutshell is really individuals' ability to have control over their daily finances. They can absorb financial shocks, they're on track to meet goals, and then that they also have a little bit of freedom of choice, get some of those wants over the needs once in a while. And so if we think about financial well-being, we need those financial capability behaviors to get to that point of financial well-being. And that's across the lifespan, having the knowledge, the access to the products we need, and being able to engage in those positive behaviors. And I also threw on my chart there that influences, because I think that's where life sometimes gets in the way. We can have the best of intentions, but sometimes we have different stressors. There's either internal or external things that are happening to us. It could be our attitudes or personality. It could be relationships. It could be the economy that sometimes just throws the best plans out the window. And I think that's where financial coaching really plays a strong role. So helping people to navigate those challenges that might come up across the lifespan, those influences, and how do we proceed from here. And what I like about the financial coaching is that, if something's not working for somebody, we don't assume we're going there with the information, or maybe it's an action, but we ask, what is it that you're thinking of, and kind of getting unstuck and getting moving forward again. Thinking about financial coaching fundamentals, in our January CFS webinar, Lucy Delgadillo had a few slides talking about financial coaching, and I don't want to go through and revisit all of those, but just a few fundamentals that we're all starting on the same page in terms of what financial coaching is. It really is about relationship-based goal attainment. It's a collaborative, egalitarian, respectful. The coach and client come together for financial coaching. I also, just for this webinar here today, I'm going to use the term client for that coach-client relationship, although different coaches and different programs might use a different term. Some call them participants or learners or coachees, so really whatever works for you. But just for ease here, I'm going to refer to the coach-client relationship. So also fundamental to coaching is that it's about facilitating a self-directed learning with the client, where the client identifies their own priority area that they want to work on. It's all about the client's motivation and the intentionality to work on this specific area where they want to move forward. The coach is there to help facilitate that process, and they focus on the person, not the problem. So they're there to support the person working through whatever the challenge might be, or onto that goal that they have in mind. And also with financial coaching, it's about action. We need to see some results. So, for example, increasing a positive and lasting behavior like opening a bank account, or making a budget and sticking to it, or funding a savings account. So just thinking about what what actions are needed to move forward. In the field of financial coaching, there's many different influences. Probably the greatest one that we see is just that executive and organizational coaching. And if you look on a bookshelf of coaching, probably most of those books there will be related to some executive or organizational coaching. We also have influences of financial coaching from behavioral economics about not what people should do with their money, but what people actually do and how people behave around their money. Also, the field of positive psychology has great influences in financial coaching. And then there's many other fields that we obviously won't be getting in here today, but just thinking about self-determination theory, solution-focused therapy, motivational interviewing, adult learning theories, health coaching, and then there's many more that all tie together to influence and provide a foundation for financial coaching. I wanted to speak for a few minutes about coaching frameworks. So a coaching framework provides a model for facilitation. It helps guide that process for the coach. And different frameworks, they emphasize different philosophies or different techniques or theories that the coach might bring to their facilitation. So I talked about some of the similarities across coaching, so the frameworks might pull out or emphasize something a little bit different within that framework. And one thing we will see across all of these different frameworks is that coaching is all about results and yielding some type of results. If you're looking for a great book just on frameworks and all the different theories that have influenced coaching, just coaching in general, not financial coaching, there's an evidence-based coaching handbook by Stober and Grant that has, I think, at least a dozen different coaching theories and models behind it that is really interesting if you want a little bit more background on this. So a few of the frameworks that we see out there in the literature are solution-focused coaching, and there's two popular models that we see. One is the GROW model and one is the goal-focused coaching. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those. And a solution-focused coaching, it's the main focus is really that the client gains a different perspective on the current situation, and then they'll develop new behaviors with that new perspective, and it really has a future and a forward focus for those behaviors. The cognitive coaching is based on some cognitive behavioral therapy roots, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then motivational interviewing, which isn't necessarily coaching per se, but it does show up in some of the health and wellness coaching literature. So I think it's important to talk about how some people are using that within a coaching framework. So that first solution-focused coaching model that we see popping up in our coaching literature is the GROW model. And a name associated with the GROW model is Sir John Whitmore, who has several books highlighting the GROW model. And the GROW typically stands for goals, both long and short term, the reality of what's the current situation, the options or different courses of action, and then the W, like the way forward, what actions will take place and when. I've also seen a variation of T-GROW where you start with the T on the topic. What are we going to explore before we even get into the GROW model? So Whitmore in particular uses the term client self-responsibility, and he tries to stay away from the term accountability because he thinks if using the term accountability takes the focus off the client. And he wants to, in his coaching process, wants to keep the client's motivation and the client's awareness and what's happening with the client on the client. Also, Whitmore feels strongly that the coach is a facilitator for the coaching process and for the process of change and the results orientation. The coach is not there to be a teacher, an advisor, an instructor. The coach is not the expert, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see, but is the expert in facilitation, not in whatever the content or the person might be getting coached around. We also see a term of SMART goals that pops up with the GROW model, and so some people might use a SMART goal with the GROW model. And there's some literature out there that has kind of a caution with sometimes using a SMART goal, because if the goal is too challenging or even if it's too specific, some of the goal attainment literature suggests that we could see a decline in performance or that the coach might also become too directive and take too much ownership of that goal. So there's some cautions with how a goal might appear with this GROW model. Another of the solution-focused approaches is the goal-focused coaching, and the name we see associated with that is Anthony Grant out of Australia. And Grant is a coaching psychologist with thousands of hours of training and practice using this goal-focused coaching model. So basically with the goal-focused coaching, the coach facilitates the process where the client sets a goal, develops an action plan, monitors those results, and then evaluates and adjusts as needed to move forward. Which really, on the surface sounds like, yeah, that's what coaching is. That's, what they do, have a goal, move forward. But the emphasis with the goal-focused coaching is that there are 20 different types of goals that Grant's identified: performance, avoidance goals, learning, distal, proximal, 20 different kinds. And I can tell you right off the bat, I am not an expert in 20 different types of goals, and being able to identify which is the best goal for each client in each situation and what helps support that goal and doesn't help support that goal. So it's a very precise approach to goal setting. So I think the challenge here with the financial coaching is what can we look at from the evidence and from the precision about different types of goals in order to apply that to financial coaching to increase that goal attainment. Another type of coaching or coaching model is cognitive coaching, where again it's goal-oriented, as is all coaching, but the focus with the cognitive coaching is to address distortions in the client's thought that might be affecting their performance. So the idea is that the coach identifies and challenges some of the client's self-limiting beliefs, and if you change those thought patterns, you're going to change the behavior. And some of the examples might be if you're coaching someone and you hear words pop up like a should or a shouldn't, addressing what's behind those, or looking at the client's facts or what they are sharing an opinion, help kind of teasing out some of that. So the challenge still lies with the cognitive coaching is tapping into what's motivating the client and helping to create those action steps and moving forward. And then finally, looking at motivational interviewing, which that came out of the 1980s, and Miller and Rolnick are two names frequently associated with this motivational interviewing. And it's not a coaching method, but we do see motivational interviewing referred to and some of the techniques in that health and wellness coaching field. And typically a motivational interviewing might be used if a client has lower motivation, or might be some resistance to change if we think about like a trans-theoretical model of change. And a lot of the coaching frameworks I just talked about are top-down, where you start with the theory and then put it into practice. The motivational interviewing was a bottom-up approach where they looked at the language and the back and forth and the relationship that led to successful change. So it's very prescriptive in how you use language, how you use your communication skills in order to help forward change and help create a change environment. So there's some confusion with interviewing and the coaching because you see a lot of the same skills used in coaching as you do motivational interviewing, but those skills might be applied very differently. And one example that jumps out at me is that, for example, using the skill of reflecting or powerful questions. In motivational interviewing, you want to be able to reflect back the client's own words maybe 6, 7, 8 times before you ask a question. That kind of moves them forward a little bit more. Versus in most coaching models, for every reflection a coach might have back, you want to follow it up with a powerful question that moves the client forward more quickly. So again, some of the same skills, but applied very differently. So thinking about all of these different models that are just general coaching models, how can we start taking this information and applying it specifically to the field of financial education. So we came up with this A4 financial coaching process where there's 4 A's, and they each stand for something, as it appears on the slide there, beginning with the alliance, and then the agenda, awareness, and then, of course, the action. So I'll break down a few of these different categories with some of the skills and the tools and how this might approach for a financial coaching model. So really, we talked about all coaching as relationship-based goal attainment. So how important is that designing the alliance where you have the client and the coach, and together they determine what's going to work best for them in their coaching relationship. So they form an alliance. And each client-coach relationship might look a little different than the client-coach relationship down the hall, or that you might have with a different client. So it's whatever is going to work best based on the needs of that client. In designing the alliance, you start to think about the logistics. How are we going to meet? How often are we going to meet? Again, you might have some parameters by your agency that requires X number of meetings or every so often. But what's the best way to check in? Does your client prefer a phone call, an email, a text? How are you going to check in between meetings if that's what you choose to do? It's also that discussion of how to work together. There might be times where you have financial information or educational information or a referral that could benefit the client. So what's a respectful way to share that? It's also a good time to plan ahead for sticky situations. If the client's not following through on what they say they're going to do, as the coach, how do they want to be held accountable? And again, it's that accountability to the alliance. You're not there as a coach to be the hall monitor. You're there to help reflect back, whether they did something or didn't do something, what's the takeaway? And there's different tools coaches use, and a lot of these are available on our CFS website with sample coaching contracts and contact information, and then, of course, the different skills that the coach brings to the session, particularly those celebratory skills, the validating, the celebrating, the positivity, because we know from our positive emotions and that positive psychology, it really increases a sense of trust, and it increases an environment for creative problem solving. So it's a nice way to start out a session with kind of celebrating what successes the client may have or what's been going on. The next A is setting the agenda, where it's an opportunity for the client to talk about what is it that they really want to achieve? What's that big picture? Maybe it's home ownership, or maybe it's buying a car, or whatever it might be. But then narrowing it down on, okay, so we have a half hour today or 45 minutes today. What would you like to focus on for our meeting today that would help move you a little bit closer to that bigger goal? So setting the goal, it's not about what the coach thinks that the client should work on. It's what the client is ready and motivated to work on. What the coach can do is that if the program has requirements, like we need to fill out this pre or post survey, or we need to check on your credit report, or whatever it might be, you need to turn in a budget, the coach can bring that to the table. It's not the coach's agenda, it's what the agency parameters are. When it comes to what the client actually wants to work on, the coach doesn't have any skin in the game. It's all about what the client wants to work on for their own personal financial goals. And there's various tools out there, some different goal-setting assessments, prioritizing different planning worksheets, and then the coach brings their skills for clarifying, articulating what the goal might be, reframing, and then self-management, because again, you're not there to help set the goal. It's up to the client for them to determine what their own goal is. Also, I would say probably the biggest part of the financial coaching process is the creating the awareness. So once you know what a person wants to work on, it's easy to see those behaviors and skills. What are they currently doing? What's working? What's not working? And then when we get into the heart of the coaching, it's looking at, okay, beneath those behaviors and skills, what are the attitudes, the beliefs, and then most importantly, those core values that are influencing those behaviors and skills, because that's kind of the heart of the lasting change. That's where we start to see, if something doesn't feel right, why is that? what's not working about that, or what would you like to change because it's important to you, not because I say you should as your coach, but because it's important to you and would be more in alignment with how you want to live your life. Another way sometimes you hear coaches speaking about this is the doing and the being. So is who you want to be as a person matching how you show up in the world, what you're doing with your finances and your financial behaviors. And also with the creating awareness, there's different tools that a coach can use, values worksheets, future self or visioning. That's something we sometimes see in the behavioral economics field where you might look at for retirement. You know, what do you want your retirement to be like, and what would that be like? So bringing some of that into your current coaching of where is it that we're headed and how will that look in the future, and that helps to apply a different perspective. If you're feeling stuck now, let's think about a time where it's going to look a little bit differently. And also that's where you use your coaching skills of questions and curiosity and validating and really holding the client's agenda. If they say they want to work on something, okay, that's what we're working on. So when it comes to defining the action, sometimes, or at least I'll speak for myself, when I'm doing some financial education or financial counseling, I am all too quick to go from the agenda to the action right away. Okay, what's the issue, what's your concern, and what are we going to do about it? And sometimes that can result in some change because there's an immediate change and an immediate relief, but it's not that long-term change that I would like to see. So stepping back from that into a coaching model, that's where that awareness comes in. So if we look at what a person wants to achieve, and then really getting in touch with the motivation and how it's best for them to achieve it, just because they know themselves best, and then moving into the action. So there's no shortcuts from what's wrong and what are we going to do about it. It's we really got to figure this out. And that's where the coach helps facilitate that process. So when it comes to defining the action, so given the client's new insight, what they've discovered about their values or what's underlying their behaviors, what do they want to do with that now? And again, it's that accountability to the alliance, not to the coach. So if they say, okay, I'm going to track all my spending for the next few weeks, and I'll come back and talk to you about that, coach, that's great. But just keeping in mind, if they don't do that, having the conversation about, so what got in the way? What are those barriers? Because if that's not going to work for you, that's what's realistic, and we need to start looking at how can we work best on your realistic life to come up with a behavior or some kind of tracking that's going to be best for you. Also, I guess looking at some of the goal attainment literature too, the actual homework or what people want to work on in between sessions is not as important as just the fact that they are going to focus and try something. I was reading a few studies about self-control, and they assigned people just kind of random physical and cognitive exercises that were totally unrelated to financial self-control. But they found that people just doing some kind of activity or exercise in between their meetings, their financial education meetings, led to a decrease in impulse spending. So it just was a matter of exercising that self-control, and it was less important what they were actually doing to practice that self-control. So I guess just keeping that in mind to whatever kind of homework assignment the client might come up with, that's great. If they don't come up with something, you as a coach can request or challenge or brainstorm or help suggest something that they could try out. And with this model, we try to do this for 4 coaching sessions. Again, it's going to be a little bit different depending on your agency and how your program is structured, but we try to shoot for those 4 coaching sessions because it gives you a chance to really work on that goal for the first session. The next session or check-in is all about deepening. Okay, what have you learned more about this goal? Are you on track? Is there something that has to be changed? Forwarding gets a chance to start practicing some of those new behaviors, and then launching is, okay, I got this, I'm ready to move forward on my own. And then there's many different factors that come with financial coaching that are too much for this call here today. But some things to think about are client readiness. So much of this relies on the client being motivated, the client being able to have some kind of self-awareness that something's working or not working that they want to address. And then also coach qualities. I mean, I've worked with some financial educators who said, no, that's not for me. I feel like I'm the expert. I want to go in there and tell people what it is that they need to do. I see it clearly, so I don't, coaching is just not my thing. And then also coaching training. I mean, I mentioned the goal-focused coaching that takes thousands of hours to be able to identify all of those different goals and to be able to apply those to the best utility of the client. Probably not realistic for a financial coaching model. So how much training and how much support to keep everyone within the same skill set and kind of that same model or that same application. And then again, evaluation. And I do believe we'll have a future CFS webinar that goes into evaluation and measurement tools a little bit more that could be applied to a financial coaching arena. So if you have not visited the UW Financial Coaching website, there's many different tools on there. There's a new publication about our measurement tool that we're using here at the UW that you might want to take a look at. So just to be sure to check out that website. And I will turn it over to Haley if there's anything you need to share before we move on.
Nope, I think send it over to Becky or Stefan, whoever is going first.
Well, thank you. This is Stefan Hench. I'm the Assistant Director of Services at the Financial Clinic. Can everyone hear me all right? Hallie, are you able to hear me?
I hear you perfectly, and it looks like we have a few people responding saying that they can hear you. There does seem to be a little bit of sound difficulties for some people, but let's carry on, and let's just remember that this will be archived and available on our website. Thank you. Go ahead, Stefan.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Peggy, for that excellent presentation, and thank you, Hallie, and to the Center for Financial Security for the opportunity to present on our financial coaching model. So this will be in 3 parts. The first part will provide a background of our model as well as 2 examples or case studies where we apply our model. The second part will be an exposition of our clinic mantras or coaching catchphrases, as we like to call them. And the third part will be discussion of some best practices that we see in the field. This is the Financial Clinic's model. The clinic is a 10-year-old nonprofit financial development firm dedicated to building financial security. Since the clinic's inception, we have found it integral to have to be very precise about how we measure our mission achievement, and we came up with this outcomes framework. We draw from our on-the-ground experience, both from the experience that we have in the financial coaching that we administer with our own staff, as well as the advocates in the sector who we train, and we take that experience to inform our latest policy and research initiatives and agendas. In this 6-point model, I'd like to briefly point out 3 of these points. The first 2, goals and assets, we will be discussing later on in the presentation, but they're very important to us, and you'll see why in a little bit. And the third one is taxes, and this is one thing that we pride ourselves on, is the inclusion of taxes in our model for 2 reasons. One is that the tax season is a wonderful opportunity for asset building and for further opportunities for financial development. And the second reason is that we see tax planning as a year-round conversation to have between coaches and customers. And just a little vocabulary note, like Peggy mentioned, that they use clients to refer to the people they serve. At the clinic, we call the people we serve customers. If the clinic's model is what we do and what we hope to achieve, the Change Machine platform is a tool for how we achieve it. Change Machine is an online software platform that enables nonprofit programs, practitioners, and public agencies to incorporate powerful financial coaching strategies into their programs. We like to call it our Swiss Army knife of financial coaching. And all the tools you'll see in this presentation come from Change Machine. When considering the application of our model, we see that our model is actually successful everywhere. We're not just concentrating on the 2,000 or so financial coaches who practice nationally, but we look at the 1.8 million practitioners in the community and social services field. We use our own direct services as a laboratory to constantly test and tweak our coaching methods and practices based on what works best. And we take those experiences and we share the lessons that we learn with the rest of the field in our capacity building and our training initiatives. So the first case study that we'll be looking at today is the financial coaching program that we run. We have 6 full-time coaches placed around New York City in nonprofit organizations and government offices. And you can see approximately where they are on the map right here.
Great, and I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Becky Smith, and I'm going to share a little bit more about our second case study throughout the presentation around our work with career advancement programs. And we'll be highlighting how discussing personal finance happens in career advancement programs and really how the coaching model fits into the work that job placement or career advancement services are providing. And it really looking at that service as the driver for what brings the customer to the door, but then leveraging the doors that customers are walking through to begin that financial coaching relationship. So we've provided trainings for the past few years to over 50 career coaches and job developers in working at workforce and career advancement programs that are providing employment services such as job training, resume writing, and interview preparation. And in our partnership, arming them with tools, financial tools, and training to incorporate these kinds of financial conversations into their work, and really looking at the connections between career advancement programs goals and the financial insecurity that their customers are experiencing, whether they previously were addressing it head-on or not. That the financial insecurity that's presenting a barrier to career advancement could really open doors for a financial coaching relationship. And so we've worked with a handful of programs. We'll use an example how we've harnessed their strengths to leverage their resources to make financial coaching a sustainable part of what they do, and giving them a few ways to measure the impact that it has on their own career advancement outcomes.
Thanks, Becky. I'd like to introduce at this point the mantras that the financial clinic uses. We consider these mantras, maybe you call them coaching catchphrases, or sayings that the coach can keep in mind that might guide the coaching process. We have several coaching mantras, but today we'll focus on 3. And the first of those mantras is the goal is the driver. Now, Peggy mentioned in her presentation that they certainly focus on goals and that whenever you're doing any kind of coaching, it's goal-directed. But we specifically like to talk about what we call action-driven financial goals. And an action-driven financial goal is basically the reason for coaching. All coaching activities take place within the lens of the goal in the background with the goal as the target. Action-driven goals have three key ingredients, or three key criteria, I should say. The first is that the goal is passionately held by the customer. The second criterion is that the goal is a forward-thinking goal. So the orientation is not on the past, maybe not on clearing up any problems that have happened in the past, but instead the goal is has a future long-term orientation. And the third point is that an action-driven financial goal is asset-oriented, meaning that it is a strength-based goal and it adds value to the life of the customer. Here you can see this is a tool that we use and we give to customers to help them elicit goals. As you can see, these goals all look to the future. They can all be passionately held, and they all add value to the customer's life as opposed to merely reducing a negative. In the financial coaching program, we see an interesting flow, if you will, of the issues that customers come in facing and where they leave, or the point that they come to through financial coaching. Customers may come in after a crisis, maybe a wage garnishment or calls from debt collectors, or mounting credit card debt that seems overwhelming, or they may come in at a particular moment in their financial life, say at the time for tax filing or at college graduation time, and our customers sometimes discover that they have student loans and they seek guidance on how to deal with them. Now, this is all well and good, and we're very, very happy to help our customers deal with these issues. But through financial coaching, we guide the customers to, in addition to dealing with these issues, to focus on an action-oriented or an action-driven financial goal, meaning passionately held, forward-thinking, and asset-oriented.
Great. And so in the career advancement example, especially when we're working with programs whose primary work is not financial security, the mantra goal as the driver becomes even more critical. So it's really about lining up program goals with the coaching model and making this work really relevant in order for it to stick. And so with a career advancement program, they start by often aligning the career goal with the financial goal and making this super tangible. The goal becomes the lens by which all of the other financial security work is viewed. And this is true for both the financial coaching example and the career advancement example. But in this case, I can give a few examples of how career goals and financial goals support each other and support the career coach to really channel other financial coaching efforts. So one example is we've seen career coaches identify just the type of profession alone and the career path, and one that is passionately held, that it might embrace some of the characteristics that Stefan described. Another example is using a spending and a saving plan to inform the type of job or the number of hours a customer seeks to secure, and ensuring that they're targeting a profession or a number of hours that will support the goals that they had articulated. We've even seen an example where practitioners are supporting their customers around goals like saving for an interview outfit. And so there's a whole spectrum of ways, we don't prescribe the way the goal connects, but that having that conversation about both the financial goal and the context of the career goal can really open up the door for all of these other financial activities to flow from that goal. And so we're moving on to our next mantra, the second mantra, which is action plan answers all. We really, I love Peggy's description of accountability to the alliance, it not being the coach, but actually the alliance that's formed. And I think that the action plan really is an illustration of this concept. We think it's the holy grail, how all of the work gets done. And it's also very informed by the behavioral economics field. We've learned so much about how people make choices or how they might be paralyzed when there are too many roads to go down. We also have learned about those hassle factors and what it really takes to make a choice, to make a decision and stick with it, and how we need to minimize those roadblocks to facilitate people's decision making. We also know about the importance of reminders and helping to set up defaults that are in alignment with the goals and outcomes people are striving to achieve, and working with short-term time frames and helping people really make those commitments. And so we see the action plan as the vehicle that navigates all of this. And so this is an example of one of the action plans our coaches use, and they start at the very beginning of the session with that goal discussion and identifying something that's passionately held, forward-thinking, and asset-oriented. And then you start to prioritize on deck. What are the things that we're working on? What's most important to the customer? They identify where they want the conversation to go. And then there might be a lot that comes up. And so being able to park some discussions in that next second so that you can facilitate that one-on-one process that happens over time in a coaching relationship, and having a real visible place to park some of those future discussions in that next check-in column. I also loved the description that Peggy shared about just doing anything, focusing and being able to try something can really be motivational. And so we like to think about that doing column being short. And coming up with one or two commitments that might come out of a session that the customer and or the coach agree to work on before they meet again. And then, of course, at the end, being able to celebrate accomplishments when items actually get done. And so we see this whole action plan process as extremely iterative and fluid, that informing that alliance and identifying the goal, all of the other actions and activities can flow from there. And it's a really great place to check in and hold each other accountable for where things are breaking down, what's going on, and how do we identify new activities that we can commit to so we can keep the process moving forward. And so the example here in the career advancement context, here we have an example of a program with small business services. This is over a 19-month time span, and some of the accomplishments that these career coaches were able to achieve. And, in starting with the goal conversation, being able to identify which jobs might require a credit screening and being able to incorporate that activity into the career coaching, or being able to start those savings conversations and opening up a bank account before they've even actually obtained the job or the promotion. And so the action plan can drive all of this work. Being able to do some action planning before the actual career advancement or outcome, and opening up those bank accounts or figuring out whatever activities are going to really support and align with that career and financial goal. And then even after the job promotion, we've seen the action plan being extremely useful in employment services work, following up with customers once they've secured the job, encouraging participants to come back in and review an employee benefits package, and that being a great door to set up direct deposit, and even ramping up savings plans that were made pre-employment. And so really the action plan is this vehicle that fuels all of the activity and helps to unstick areas of someone's financial life that are stuck, that they've identified a desire to work on. And so we think, the action plan makes this all possible in any context. And so Stefan will give you the example of what that actually looks like in our financial coaching context.
Yes, certainly. So you can see here, these are the results of coaches and customers in our clinic-administered financial coaching program following through with their action plans. So we see action plans in terms of financial coaching as the cement that binds the relationship that the coach and the customer have. So, necessary things once the coach and the customer meet. A is completing the actions that are agreed upon during the meetings, and also returning for future meetings. So, if a customer comes to between 3 and 4 meetings is great, and that's when we definitely see great outcomes, and we see customers kind of turn the corner at that point, and achieve some great financial security. And you can see some of those examples right here. Our final coaching mantra that we'd like to discuss today is saving is an activity, not an amount. As we mentioned before, one of our favorite points of our 6-pointed model is assets or savings. And for us, it's important that not necessarily how much our customers save, but that they establish the habit of saving. Indeed, we would consider someone who faithfully saves $20 every 2 weeks for 6 times. That person we would consider in some ways to be more financially secure than another person who gets a large tax refund of $2,000, puts the whole thing in the bank, but then must draw down on that tax refund in the upcoming weeks and months. When we present this framework to our customers, it's very often that we get some pushback and there are objections. And the objections range from, I've never saved, I can't save, to, I don't even have enough money to pay for what I'm buying right now, to I have a lot of debt, so how can I save if I have a ton of debt? And what we would say to that is the first step is to, develop the habit of saving, even if it's just $5 a month or $1 a month even. And the first way to do that is to think like a saver. So, all it takes to be a saver is to just put away some amount of money regularly. And as long as we get our customers to do that, we are immensely happy with the result.
Awesome. And so in the career advancement example, I think savings is an activity, not an amount, is just such a powerful piece of this work that happens at the career advancement program. And so being able to engage customers early on in that savings conversation before the job or before the advancement, and getting that activity going from the outset, being able to connect the goal to the savings amount has tremendous implications on their ability then, when they either do secure the job or additional hours or higher wages, to then be able to allocate additional resources that come in, divert those toward the goal. And so we've really seen this very powerful in even in fueling how much people are able to put away, and being a real driver for the work and career advancement programs. And so to wrap up, what I'd love to do is just share high level 5 keys to success, what we think, what we've seen coaches need to be successful. And the first is an outcomes framework made easy, really having, all programs, as Peggy shared early on, you might have different program requirements or different objectives that the program is actually aiming toward, and how that meshes with the financial coaching skills and facilitated, really brought to life through a framework is really critical. And so this is baked into our organization. We really nurture a culture of inquiry about the coaching process, and making this work just really accessible and a part of the day-to-day discussions that coaches are having. The second takeaway is a consistent set of customer engagement tools. And so we know that financial education alone is not enough to help our customers make that lasting behavior change. And so being able to take, something that could be like a curriculum, but really breaking it down into digestible, relevant pieces. You saw a few of the tools today that our coaches use, but we think the timing of that information and how it gets introduced in the one-on-one coaching session is really critical to how it then gets digested and then acted upon. And so, we've got about 90 customer engagement tools that our coaches are using that they're not using all of, but that they're able to call upon to support or facilitate the discussions that they're having with their customers. The third reflection is real-time data for real-time insights. So I touched a little bit on this in point 1, but I just want to shout out the Center for Financial Security's measurement tool. We've actually incorporated that into all of our coaching sessions and are also teaching other organizations to include that in their initial fact-finding and gathering as they start these conversations with customers. And so I think this having access to data that's happening on the ground and using that to make programmatic choices is really critical and just helps so much with program performance, but being constantly improving and being a better coach. And then the fourth observation is ongoing professional development. So too often we've seen groups, or even for our own new financial coaches, they go to the first training, but with this work, the learning never stops. And so it's not about just one training, but really how are you fueling your ongoing professional development? And really I'll just end then with the fifth observation, which is access to a community of practitioners. And really having that network, whether you are a brand new coach, first time sitting down with a customer one-on-one to have this type of a conversation, or you're extremely experienced, relying on each other as we're all exploring this work and building this conversation into our own practices. It's so critical to have access to that network. And I'd say our own financial coaches say, being able to ask each other questions and just case by case work through these things is really one of the most helpful ways to really grow and to be a better resource for our customers. And so I just want to, I know we're about to move into Q&A, but I'd love to just share next Tuesday, we have a symposium coming up that actually looks at all this work in a reentry context and folks that are working with justice-involved individuals. So similar to the workforce work I was describing in that case study, but we'd love for folks to tune in and check that out. So Peggy or Hallie, I'd like to turn it back over to you guys. I know that we've got some questions that are coming through. And thank you so much.
Yeah, we sure do. Thanks so much to all the presenters. That was fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and launch right into the Q&A portion. We have about 8 minutes left, and we did get quite a few questions. So I'm going to send this first question over to Peggy. So Peggy, you can unmute. So this one is actually specifically asking about coactive coaching and whether this would be considered a framework. And on that same vein, how would you go about identifying that something is a framework as opposed to a coaching style or just the title of a book?
Sure. The information I shared, especially with our A4, is very much in alignment with the coactive coaching model. So when I use the words model or framework, it's really a process that helps guide the coaching facilitation, and it's kind of a container for those coaching skills. So in many ways, it doesn't really matter what the model or the framework is. If somebody's a really skilled coach, they're going to be able to apply those coaching skills, following those rules that they've come to know so well. But especially for beginning coaches, including myself, we need to have some kind of parameters, some kind of guidelines to help us move through the coaching facilitation process using our coaching skills. So you might pick up a book out there. It might just review coaching skills, but I guess I would look for, does it give you some kind of container, some kind of parameters to follow in order to apply those skills? So I guess that's the difference I look at between, a model or a framework versus just maybe a list or help supporting your coaching skills.
Great. This question, I'll pose this to Peggy first, but then Becky and Stefan, feel free to jump in as well. How long is a typical coaching session? And then let me just have this be a two-parter for you, Peggy. And based on the model that you went through today, would that be a 4-session model per goal? So based on that, it ended with forwarding and launching. This is the 4-part where this question popped up. Is that clear to you, what that question was getting at?
Sure. I can jump in, and in terms of the length, it's going to depend on your program, your clientele, and your goals that you want for the coaching. I have worked with some programs where the coaches have 15 minutes a week with their clients, face-to-face, and so that's a really short amount of time when you look at the coaching perspective. I try to get a half hour to 45 minutes of coaching time just to be able to give enough time for each of those sections, the alliance building, the agenda, awareness, action. So that would be an ideal 30 to 45 minutes, and up to an hour if you can get it, but you need to work with what the parameters are for your own coaching program. And the 4 coaching sessions that I talked about are using 4 sessions with each coaching client and keeping in mind that they have a big picture goal that might take them years to get to. And what we do for each of those 4 sessions is work on a singular, smaller goal for each of those sessions that they would like to achieve that starts building up those behaviors and the long-term results that would help lead to that longer-term goal. So each of those 4 sessions might focus on a different mini goal, like maybe they want to talk about tracking, or maybe they want to look for ways to save money day to day that help lead to that bigger goal, but they could be a little bit different shorter-term goals for each of the 4 sessions. So hopefully that answers the person's question.
I think so. Becky, did you have anything to mention in terms of the time frame, or is it pretty much what Peggy said? Go ahead and jump in.
Hi, this is Stefan, and speaking in regards to the financial coaching program specifically, it's actually exactly the same. We say 30 to 45 minutes is the minimum, and an hour is ideal. But more important than the length of time for meetings is the number of meetings and that the customer comes back. So it's more important that we get hopefully 3 meetings with the customer than that they're there an hour each time.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and pose a question to you folks at the financial clinic. How did you track your outcomes from all these individual customers that you coached, and over what period of time did you track them?
Hi, this is Stefan again. So the numbers that we showed for our financial coaching program, that is from Change Machine. Our online case, part of the Change Machine platform is a data entry and case management section, and it's, for my money, the most interactive and, easy to use case management platform out there that also serves as a data tracking system on the back end. And so those numbers that you saw there, they're from when we launched Change Machine internally, which was in the summer of 2013.
Great, and I'll just add for the Career Advancement Program, that data collection actually happened pre-Change Machine Day, so it was actually tracked through the small business services where it was a CEO, Center for Economic Opportunity contract, and they did their own data collection, and the analysis was done on the back end over 19 months.
Great. And Becky, thanks so much for mentioning that we will be having that upcoming webinar, or actually you mentioned the outcome measures that CFS did, that we put together. And we will be having a webinar in the future on those outcome measures, as Peggy mentioned, I think. I think we're actually out of time. We have a lot more questions, so I will actually forward the questions to Peggy, Becky, and Stefan so that we can get some of those answered. Hopefully everybody is available to answer those over the next week or two, meaning you presenters, because I appreciate that everyone had so many questions today. That was great. I just want to remind all the listeners that the webinar will be archived on the CFS website, cfs.wisc.edu. I'll also have the Financial Clinic have a copy of that as well so they can post it. It'll take about 1 week. The PowerPoint will be posted almost immediately following this webinar, though. I also would like to remind everyone that we do have an upcoming webinar in March, so please join us for that. I'll be posting the link shortly. That is going to be on emergency savings, and the presenters will be from the newly published book called A Fragile Balance, Emergency Savings and Liquid Resources for Low-Income Consumers. Once again, I would like to thank Peggy, Becky, and Stefan for your excellent presentations and insights on the topic today, and thank you to the listeners who tuned in. With that, I will say have a great day. Thank you.